In this presentation I will make a walkthrough of how to make a small JSON app. And this JSON app will be able to do something like this, that we have for 3 tables in a restaurant, and we would like to be able to book one of the tables. And for example, when I click this one, the book table button, I get a new form over here where I can choose a date, and I can choose time or enter a time, for example this 2030, and then my email address here like this. And when I click the make booking, the form disappears and I will output the JSON object that I should send to the server. There will be no servers in this presentation, it will just be client-side programming. So let's have a look at some code. Our data looks like this. We have 3 items in our JSON file, and it's table ID 1, table name red table, and then 2 blue table and 3 green table. As we can see here, we have red, blue and green table. And as you can see here in my index, I have chosen to use the Bootstrap CSS framework to avoid to do some styling. I just need to make some markup that follows the standard in Bootstrap. So the first thing we will do is to make a table where we can receive our data and show them. So I will make a div for my tables, and I will give it an ID, tables, and I will give it a class. And here comes some of the Bootstrap classes that I need to use. So I will say this will span over 6 columns, so it will be column large 6, and I will make it to pull to the left. Oops, pull to the left, because I like to have my form, which I will make in a moment, and make that pull to the right, so it stays on the right side of the tables. So in order to show our data, as we can see here, I put my data into the folder data, and I have my index file here and my JavaScript file here. So I will save this and then jump to my empty JavaScript file. It holds only the basic information to the basic structure for a jQuery setup. When I want to retrieve some data from some JSON data, I will use the AJAX methods in jQuery. So I will use .getJSON, and I would like to go to my data folder and get the restaurant table JSON. And when I get that data, I would like to receive it as my tables in a function. So this is my callback function. So it will be asynchronous. That means I will try to get it, and when I get a response, it will be something like this. So I will not make any kind of error handling. I will just assume that I get my data correctly. So for each of my tables, I would like to output them as we saw here in 3 rows. But before we do that, I would like to output in the console the tables, so I can see what I get from my file, from my JSON file. So I'll save this, and I will go over here, make a new tab for my localhost restaurant booking. As we can see, nothing happens here right now, but we see we receive an array of 3 objects. So we have the table ID 1 and red table, 2 blue table, 3 green table. So now I have my data. Now I just need to output them. So in order to output them, I could use my there are different ways of using jQuery or pure JavaScript to output it, but I will just use the $each. So for each of my tables, I would like to make a function which receives an index. That means where am I in this this iteration, and then the object, and the object would be the table. So in here I can make a console log again, and then output the table just to see what will happen. So when I refresh this, I see I now have 3 table rows, and these 3 table rows I would like to output them in a table. So in order to do that, I would like to make a variable before I go through the tables, and I will name it S for string, and it will contain a table, and I'll just have table row with some table headers, and these table headers will be table, and then I need to have a column for my button. So this would be my structure, and for each of my tables I would like to add to this string a table row, and then I would like to add a table data, and inside this table data I will put the table name, and then in the next table data I would like to put the button. So before we go any further, I would like to make a variable for each of these table names, and I would like to also have the table ID so I can see which table I clicked. So I'll make 2 variables, one for my table name, which will come from table, and it will be table name, something like this, and then I would like to have the table ID, which would be the table ID. As we can see over here, this is my table ID, this is my table name. So now I have my 2 values. I can put them inside here like this, and then table name, make some space, make it nice, and then I will make another cell for my table, for my button, and my button will have this will use this table ID. So I'll make a button with a data table ID, which would be table, so like this, and int this attribute value, and inside the button I will have the text book table int button, and then I will end the cell, and then I will end the row. But let's have a look at it. If we put it up here, it looks a little bit nicer, so it's easier to get a grip of what is going on. This is a TD, and then we will end here. We have it, and now we only need to output our table. I would like to output it into this table, the div with the ID tables. So in here we will say that this element with the ID tables will receive some HTML, which will be what is inside our string. So let's have a look here. Now we have this red table, blue table, green table, and our buttons here. In order to make it look a little bit more nice, I will add some Bootstrap classes, and the first one will be for the table, which would be table striped and table bordered. And for our buttons, it would be, here we have it, class btn, and it will be btn primary to get a blue a blue button. So let's have a look. Now it looks more like we expected. And now I want to make the button be able to receive an event, a click event. So we would like to add a class for the button book. So when we hit the button book, it will hopefully be able to output something for us, like the ID, the table ID, this one here. So it will be function, and for this function we will need to just console log this, just to see who was it that was clicked. So when I save it, go over here, refresh it, and get the console up, and I click, nothing happens. So why is that? It's because we have made a dynamic creation of our buttons. That means the DOM, or the jQuery object tree hasn't acknowledged that this button has been made, and there's an event for it. So one of the ways we can do it is to wait to add this click event until it is done here with the get JSON and created the button. So we can use the promise that when it has been done, I would like to add the click event to the button. So we can say that button book dot click. So here we can make a variable for the table ID, which will be the button that has been clicked. That means $this, and get the attribute of data table ID. And we can make a console log of the table ID. So 2, 1, and 3. So now we know who has been clicked. Then we are able to open this form that we need to have, as we can see here. I'd like to see this form over here when we click, and we want to be able to make a booking for the corresponding table. So we need somehow to store which table is it this booking is going to be booking for. So we know the table ID, and now we need to make a form where we can input our booking. So let's go to the index, and I just made a copy of the result, or the result of my example here. So I'll just paste this this data, and as you can see, we have now a lot of code. And this code, perhaps you haven't worked with Bootstrap before, but in order to make this form look nice, I've chosen to use the standard Bootstrap classes form horizontal, and then I want to make it split into 2. That means I have 6 columns here. In Bootstrap we're working with 12 columns, and we have 6 columns here and 6 columns here. This one is pulled to the left, and this one is pulled to the right. So you can see here I made it hidden from the beginning, so the form is not to be seen, but when I click one of the buttons, I would like to show it. And then it has an ID in order to make it possible to retrieve the data. So when I click the submit button down here, the make booking button, it will find out that, okay, this form has been submitted. Now I want to retrieve all the data, and then I want to show them in the console. So let's just walk through here. These are each of the form elements, as we can see here, if we go here, we have form elements, and it's the date here. We have the label date, as you can see here, and we have the input here, which is an input with the type date. And when we use the date type in Chrome, we get this chooser here for the date. And the same goes for my time with the label and input time. So again, if it's Chrome, we have this possibility to change the time through these controls. And then the last one we have is the email. Oh, it should say email here. And then we have this the email input, type email, which means that if I don't enter the correct email address, I will get an error. And then we have the last one is the submit button, and it holds only, it needs only to be put just below these input fields. So I made it offset 2 columns. That means these 2 columns, the other labels are white. We make an offset. That means it will be set just below the inputs. And then I added a hidden input for the table ID. So every time I click on a button, I will change the value of this input to this table that I have clicked. So that's the first thing we'll do. We want to make this appear. So if I just change this to text, we can have a look at it when we update the browser. So the first thing we will do is to we want to ask if this has been this click, the button book has been clicked, and then we want to, here we have, this is called booking table ID. So we want to, in the booking table ID, I think it was, yes, correct, the value of that would be the table ID. And then we need to remove the class height from this form booking. And the form booking was this one up here. It has this height class, so we want to remove this class height. So let's have a look here. Just there we can see we have 1 down here in our input, which should be hidden, but right now it's text, so we can see that it is correct, that our the table number or the ID corresponds to what is set into this this hidden input field. So now let's make it hidden again, and when we refresh it, click here, we can see there's no hidden, but it's changing as we saw before. So now we have this, we are showing the booking, but nothing happens when we click this. Actually, yes, something happens. We try to send the form, but we don't want to send it like that. We would like to stop it from sending, because when it sends the parameters as well. So we would like to stop it from submitting, and we are making an event listener for this form booking. So when we try to submit it, we would like to, first thing is to make it return false. That means it will not submit. So let's have a look what happens when we click this. We click this one now, nothing happens. So now we can make it collecting our data, and for example, like to add the class height to make it disappear. So the first thing we will do is to say this. This is my form booking. So I would like to add class height. So when I click this, it disappears and nothing happens up here in URL, as you can see. So that's the first thing we want to do. Then we would like to output what is inside our form. So we would like to make a data object. Just make an empty one, and in this data object we would like to say that table ID equals this dot find. We like to find what is inside the booking table ID, the value of that. But right now we are doing something that we are not allowed to do, or we are allowed but it's not efficient. We are repeating this, and every time we make a lookup in the this object, we are decreasing our performance. So when we're talking jQuery, so we'll begin with making a variable called form booking, which will be reference to this. So now we can use form booking here, and we can use form booking here, and the same goes for the other ones. Dot email equals form booking dot find email, and then get the value of it. That means what is inside. Let's just output this to see if we collect some data. So it was the email. As you can see, yes, we collected the table ID 1. Let's have a look at table ID 2. And if we change this one to this one, you can see it changes as well. So now we only need to output the other ones. That means the booking time and the booking date. But actually I would like to make this look more nice. So instead of having them as defining the empty element and the empty object and then adding them as attributes, I would like instead to make them as just an ordinary JSON object. So I will use table ID, and then I will grab this one here, and then I will make email this one, and I think I will make 2 of these for my booking time. And my booking date. And I don't need the last comma. So now I can console log data, and hopefully it will look as expected. Here 19, 20. So now we have the table ID 1, email, blah blah blah, and 2. Let's change this one to 15th, and here a bit later. As we can see, it changes. So now we have our small app that enables us to output the tables from our restaurant tables JSON, and we have a a hidden form which will appear when we click one of these book table buttons, which we are making here in our when we get the JSON. So when we click, we have this event listener for each of these buttons. When we click, we unhide it, or we we unhide it by removing the class hide, and when we submit the form, we hide it again, and then we output the data.